Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Craig, also known as NovaGas from the Keyboard Heroes, and I'm here today to give you a tutorial video on how to play Jamaica the board game. I'm doing these tutorials as part of a little testing series to teach how to play games through Tabletop Simulator. Any rules you learn here, of course, can be translated into the full physical board game version, and I would encourage you to buy most of the physical board games that you do come across in this tutorial series, as hopefully the ones I'm doing tutorial videos of have quite good worth to them. At least I enjoy them. So let us begin off-the-cuff tutorial on the board game Jamaica. So to give you some narrative plot setting for this game, you are all essentially pirates. It's a 2 to 6 player game where you are racing around the island of Jamaica as part of Henry Morgan's 30th anniversary, his birthday party essentially, for being governor of the island. So what are you going to be doing in this game? Essentially, if you have a look over here, you each get one of these 6 pirate ships, which you'll be racing around this board, and the first person to complete a circuit draws the game to its conclusion. The point of the game is to have the most points by the time the game comes to an end. And the way that you accumulate these points is through, firstly, the race position. So if you have a look on the board over here, you see that if you end the race in first position, you'll be awarded 15 points. And depending on where you end second, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth on this board, different point values will be associated. So if you look at these quadrants of the map, there are numbers associated with these, and those will be the amount of points that you end the game with. If you are past this red line over here, you immediately end the game with a -5 score. Now, your place finish isn't the only way to gain victory points towards the conclusion of the game, but the amount of gold that you have when the game comes to an end is added to this number, and the person with the highest total wins the game. For Henry Morgan, being the governor of Jamaica, is not only interested in first place, but he is a fancy man, a fancy pirate, and he loves his gold. Right, so let's see how a turn is involved. So let's start with the setup of it. Each character will be taking their corresponding character's cards and placing them on the board next to where they would be. Once this is done, you will be setting up the rest of the board. So, as you see in this Tabletop Simulator version, the treasure chests are all set up in their corresponding locations. However, if you're playing the board game version, you'll want to place a treasure chest token on each of these sectors that have a skull in them. After that, you will want to have a look at these 12 treasure cards and first shuffle them, and then remove 3 cards from the top of this deck, so it adds a bit of randomness to your game. So there will only be 9 treasure cards in total when you're playing your game of Jamaica. From there, you will give each player 3 food, and they will also take 3 doubloons worth of treasure. Over here are the cannonballs, or in the game it's also your gunpowder. And these bananas in the board game version are the food tokens, just so that there isn't any confusion with that. And then we will look at the other functionality of the game. So the game is by and large divided into 2 sections. When you take your turn, your movement turn, it is divided into the morning and afternoon section, which are represented by this little panel on the board over here, and these 2 dice. So what you'll do on a turn, you'll be rolling these dice, and they will be assigned various values, and the captain, who we'll get to in a moment, is the one that determines where these dice are placed and what values are associated as the following. So the die on the left is associated with the morning, as you can see by this correlation, and the die on the right is associated with the afternoon action. So on a player's turn, you will mainly be deciding to move. And in order to move, what you'll be doing is you'll be drawing cards from your character deck, and you'll be playing them. The details of this we'll get to in a moment, but if you have a look at the cards, you will see it has 2 icons. The icon at the top left of the card represents your morning action, and the icon at the top right represents your afternoon action. So the doubloon icon represents the ability to take gold, and the green arrow represents the ability to move forward. Likewise, if we look through the cards, you'll see that cannon icon represents your ability to take gunpowder, or in this case, balls from the center of the table, or the bank as it were. If you see a red arrow, that is the icon to move backwards. And lastly, there should be a food icon somewhere amongst this. And there it is. So at the top left is your morning action. You'll be able to draw food. Now, the way that this works is when your action card is played, the icon is associated then with the value that is assigned to the morning or the afternoon action. So if we were to take this movement card, which has a backwards movement followed by a forward movement, the backwards movement would have a value of 1 in this instance, and the forward movement would have a value of 2. So, for example, let's take as if we were playing the green character of the Flying Dutchman. And on his turn, he would, well, in this instance, he would be moving backwards by 1 space, which would end him over here. And then when a character moves backwards, or when a character moves, as it were, he has to pay a certain price associated with various sectors around the board. So if we have a look over here, this sector has 3 squares in it, which indicates when he lands in that sector, he has to pay the price of 3 food. The squares represent food. If we were to look at other sectors of the map, we have these little circular indicators over here, which indicate a port, and they represent the amount of gold you would have to pay if you end up in the sector. So once you have paid the 3 food for this character, because he ended up in that sector, you'd pay the 3 food, then you would go in to resolve your afternoon action, which would send your character forward by 2 marks, as indicated by the afternoon action at the center of the board. The problem now being that the Flying Dutchman, or Oliver Levasseur, can not pay the price of 3 food because there is no food left in his cargo hold. What happens then is that the character is forced to retreat or move backwards a number of squares until you get to a free square. There are certain sectors or squares in the board that are considered free, and when your character cannot pay the price for landing in a sector, you have to move back to these locations. Generally, it's the starting location of Port Royal, or there are various treasure skulls located around the game board, and those are considered free actions as well. So therefore, it is a very viable strategy to move your character beyond a treasure point, be unable to pay the cost for the sector that you ended up in, be forced to retreat to the treasure point, and then loot a treasure. This brings us to the treasure looting of the game. When you end up on a sector that has a treasure icon, you remove the icon or the token, and you draw a card from the treasure chest. Now, when you draw a card from the treasure chest, you bring this into your hidden zone or look at it in your hand if you're playing the board game version, and you flip it over and you have a look. There are several different kinds of treasures. This one is a treasure that you keep until the end of the game and adds a total of 3 to your score at the end. It's essentially the equivalent of 3 gold doubloons. Other treasures are cursed treasures, and this would remove 3 from your score. And there are special treasures, and this is one such, which allows you to re-roll or force a re-roll of your own attack die or an opponent's attack die when you are engaged in combat. This treasure card allows you to have an extra cargo hold on your ship, and so on and so forth. More cursed treasures and more additional cards that will allow you to gain more victory points when the game comes to its conclusion. This card allows you to have 4 cards instead of 3 in your hand when you're choosing your movement actions. This card allows you to have 3 more treasure, as it were, and this one automatically adds 2 to any attack rolls that you will be engaging with in any fight, either through attacking or defense. And this is the point in the tutorial where I lost all power last night. I'm back now, the following day, and I've set up the board again just to cover a few things that I forgot from the previous session. So over here at the bottom, going back to treasure cards, what I neglected to mention was that all the positive gold doubloon cards and the curse cards, which you keep until the end of the game, they're kept face down next to your character card until the very end of the game. And this has significance when it comes to battles, which I'll cover in just a moment. But the special cards, such as the cannons or the sabers or the scrolls or the extra cargo space, they're placed face up next to your character board so that all players at all time can see them and that their benefit is constantly in effect. Right, so the next result of a movement can be combat. So when a player is in a particular sector and another player enters that sector, combat ensues. Now the way this works is that the player that had just entered the sector is considered the aggressor, and the player that is already in the sector is considered the defender. When this happens, the first thing that players do, or the first thing that the aggressor will do, is decide how many gunpowder, or cannonballs in this case, will be dedicated from their ship's cargo hold to the fight at hand. In this case, they'll be dedicating 3. Once that this has been allocated, the aggressor will take this combat die and roll that and see what the value is. So here we have rolled a value of 6. He takes that value of 6, combines it with the amount of gunpowder he dedicated to the fight to give him a grand total of 9. Then play passes to the defender. The defender does the same thing. So if we go over here to this player and have a look at his cannonballs, he is also going to dedicate 3 to this fight, picks up the combat die, rolls that, and and it rolls right off the table. But it should pop here in a moment, and there we have an 8. So we had a 6 plus 3, which gave us a grand total of 9, but the defender rolled an 8 plus 3, which gives us a grand total of 11. Therefore, the defender in this instance wins. However, if it were the other way around, and the aggressor won this battle, then the following happens. The aggressor can do one of 3 things, and this is where the face-down value of the treasure cards come into effect. The aggressor can decide to take 1 treasure card from the opponent, either a random one from his stack over here, or one of the face-up ones, if that is indeed the treasure card that he desires. The second possible thing aggressor can do is give a cursed treasure away. So if, over here for instance, the red player had won the battle, and this were the red player's cursed treasure, he could in fact then give his cursed treasure card to that player, therefore impinging on their result at the end of the game. And the third and final thing that you can do if you win a battle as the aggressor is you can take the entire contents of a cargo hold of the defending loser in this instance. So if, for example, and these again would be food tokens instead of bananas in the board game version, there were 4 bananas in this person's treasure hold. And as the victorious aggressor, you decided you indeed desired and craved bananas, you could take all bananas from one cargo hold and transfer them to your own, in accordance to the cargo hold rules, which I'll cover right now. So that is the result of combat and the possible outcomes of that. Lastly, I would just like to quickly cover is the functionality of a cargo hold. So let's set up this cargo hold to show you this rule. Let's put some gold into the section over here, and we will put some ammunition into the section over here, and we will put 2 more bananas into the section over here, and perhaps just 2 gold coins over here. Now, the way cargo works in Jamaica is that if you were to acquire more of the same resource, so let's say there are 4 bananas in here, and I was able, through my actions, to draw some more bananas, I wouldn't be able to stack them in a cargo hold that already has bananas. When you draw new items, they can only go into an empty cargo hold. So, in this instance, let's say I landed on a tile over here, and as part of my action, I could now draw 3 more bananas. Now, when you draw a new resource, it cannot take the location of an old resource of the same kind. So I couldn't remove 2 bananas to replace it with 3 bananas. But I can certainly remove 2 gold doubloons and then replace that cargo hold with 3 bananas. And the same would apply to any other kind of resource that is available. And that is essentially the cargo hold rule. It applies for whenever you are picking up new resources, or when in a battle you are stealing resources from another player and your cargo hold happens to be full at the time. Right, so I figured just a final way to end off this tutorial video is to play through one turn of the game. So I'm just going to do a quick edit to set up the game for a 3-player mode and show you how a first turn basically runs. Right, and here is the board, fresh as it were, and we're going to do a quick player setup and we will conduct the first turn of the game just to give you a further edification of how Jamaica works. Right, so the first thing that you want to do is make sure that you only have 9 cards in the treasure chest deck, so you can shuffle it, and then remove 3 cards from the game to add that element of randomness. Once that is done, each player takes their deck of character cards that are associated to them, keeping them face down and placing them next to their player mat. If I can actually grab hold of these. Then you allocate the starting resources to each player. At the beginning of the game, each player receives 3 food put into a cargo hold of their choosing. Following the distribution of bananas, you will then take 3 gold doubloons, and it also occupies a cargo hold of each player. In this version of the Tabletop Simulator version of Jamaica, the treasure chest tokens are already pre-configured on the map, but if you're playing the board game version, what you would do is you would take the treasure chest tokens and place them on each sector where there is a skull, indicating a free space or a pirate port where you can acquire this treasure. And anytime you see or land on a treasure token, you remove that token and you take a treasure card. Once you've done this, the next thing you do is you allocate the first player token to the first player, and which is the compass, and that indicates who will be the captain for the first round of the game. Once you've done that, just give your movement character cards a shuffle, and then the game will begin in earnest. So the first thing that the captain will do is come over here and roll these dice. So we've rolled 2 6s. Then we come over here, and each player now draws 3 cards into their hand. In this instance, or in Tabletop Simulator, they would go into a hidden zone, or into your hand, which would appear just over here. If you're playing the board game physical version, they would obviously just go into your hand, and you make them visible to yourself, so that you can see all the icons associated with this. Now, the benefit of being the captain is you are the person that gets to decide the most beneficial card that you can configure with these numbers, because you can get to decide, let's, for the sake of argument, turn this into a 3 so we don't have identical numbers. Now, where the 6 and the 3 may be, whether it's in the morning or afternoon, will have significant impact on your play turn. So if we have a look over here, our first card allows us to have gold in the morning and gold in the evening, or we can move backwards in the morning and go forward in the evening, or draw cannon tokens in the morning and draw gold in the evening. So I think a very beneficial way to start off the game would be, in this instance, to, let's have a look, if we went backwards and then went forward 6, so 1, 2, 3, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, probably not the best move. So to begin with, Captain Oliver will then play face down his gold in the morning and gold in the evening, setting himself up for a good run of gold, especially if he lands on any of these locations that require gold later in the game. So deciding on that, it doesn't matter if he has 6 in the morning or 3 in the evening, so you'll play 6 in the morning, 3 in the evening. Once he's allocated those dice to their position, the rest of the players have a look at their cards and decide which one they want to play. In this instance, Captain Rackham decides that he is going to sprint ahead and puts the forward in the morning and forward in the evening card forward to the game. And we come over to Henry Morgan and have a look. And Henry Morgan decides he wants gold in the morning and movement in the evening, because that is just the way that Henry Morgan rolls, and he is not logical at the best of times. We come over, and the first person, Captain Oliver, reveals his card because he is the captain, and he resolves both actions at the same time. So Captain Oliver receives gold in the morning of a value 6. So he takes 6 gold and fills up 1 treasure hold with 6 gold doubloons, not stacking them with gold from another cargo hold. Then he resolves the afternoon action. In this case, he draws 3 additional gold, placing them in a fresh cargo hold. Once he has resolved both the morning and afternoon action, play passes to the next captain. John Rackham reveals his card, and his card is to move. So in the morning, he moves 6 spaces. So John Rackham goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Aha! So when you land on a location, you have to pay its cost immediately. If you have a double movement card, you will pay the cost for moving in the morning and pay the cost for moving in the evening. In this instance, John Rackham cannot pay the 5 gold required by this port. He gives over all the gold that he does have, and now he has to move backwards until he gets to a free spot. So he goes over here. He can't pay the 3 gold associated with that port either, so he moves back to this location, a skull, and there happens to be a treasure. So this is a very viable strategy. He removes the token, and then, befitting a captain, he steals a treasure card. He looks at this in private to see what it is first, and lo and behold, he has a special treasure card which allows him to have 4 movement cards in his hand, or 4 action cards in his hand, opposed to the normal amount of 3 that any other captain would have, which is this is a great benefit. Now that he's resolved that, he will resolve his afternoon action, which is a move forward of 3 spaces. John Rackham goes forward 1, 2, 3, ends up over here. It costs 3 bananas or 3 food tokens to remain in this location. He takes his bananas and chucks them back into his banana bag. And then play passes to the next character. So, Henry Morgan reveals his card and in the morning decides to pilfer the treasure chest of 6 gold doubloons. 6, and in the afternoon he moves forward 3 spaces. So Henry Morgan goes 1, 2, 3, ends up on a space where there are 2 square tokens indicating 2 bananas need to be paid, or 2 food tokens, and they are placed back into the bank of the game. Once he's resolved his morning and afternoon action, everyone draws up an additional card from their movement deck, keeping that in their hands and concealed from everyone else. The played card goes face up into a discard pile for each player. Then, in this instance, since John Rackham has a special ability to have 4 revealed action cards, he takes another one, reveals it face up so he can see it. And then the captain's token is passed from Oliver to John Rackham over here. And then play begins afresh. And that is how Jamaica works, and play continues in this fashion until the first player crosses the finish line back at Port Royal. As one final note, it should just be stated as a FAQ that if 2 players happen to be in one location and a 3rd player enters that location, the aggressor can decide which player to attack and which one to attempt to loot and plunder. Alright, so this was just an off-the-cuff tutorial video of Jamaica. I hope that you found the tutorial useful. If you have any questions, I can address them in the comments section. Otherwise, enjoy taking your captains and racing around Jamaica in honor of Henry Morgan's 30 years of governing the island of Jamaica. I've been Craig, also known as NovaGas from the Keyboard Heroes. Thank you very much, and take care.